Broadcasting from the beautiful state of Maine, welcome to another episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast, the show that focuses on identifying and developing the skills and behaviors that will inspire, empower, and compel others to follow your lead. Listen as Patrick's guests talk about the powerful leadership approaches they have identified and developed, which are vital for leading in today's challenging times. These are the same approaches that will positively impact you as a leader too. Learning from Leaders provides the right balance of leadership research with real-world scenarios, making it easy for you to rise above your best. All right, let's start the show.
Hey everybody, I'm Patrick Varno, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Learning from Leaders. This is episode 149, and this episode is all about building a retention moat around your talent. How do we keep them? And we hear so much today: quick quitting, quiet quitting, the Great Resignation. I would argue that these are nice new terms for old problems that we've had. And this idea of building a moat is really about understanding what are the social needs that employees have today, and also what are the behaviors that need to be demonstrated by leaders that will help to build this moat, really not only retaining the talent you have, but also creating an environment where you attract and develop the best talent as well. So let's get into it. Hey everybody, thank you for joining me on another episode. This one really has been something I've been thinking about for a while. This idea of building a retention moat around addressing three things that I think are going on right now in terms of terms. And I look at it like a three-legged stool. We hear these terms around quiet quitting. The newest one I've heard is quick quitting. And then obviously the one that probably most of us are familiar with is the Great Resignation. And to me, all three of these, while they're novel terms, are dealing with decades-old issues. And especially when we talk about the Great Resignation and quiet quitting, I'll start there. Because to me, when I look at that, I think of quiet quitting and the Great Resignation as almost being the same pool of individuals. And in an environment where job opportunities are great, I think the disengaged that are sitting quiet quitting, they go over to the Great Resignation. They actually leave, they take action. And they move out of that space of just hanging out at companies where they're not happy, and they look for opportunities other places, right? So that pool of individuals, that bucket increases, and the quiet quitters decreases, right? In times when we're going to experience where the job market might be tighter, I had a conversation with somebody the other day that was like, well, I can't wait until things tighten up, and I think a lot of this stuff will go away. And I think this person really, and I mentioned this to them, is that I think you're mistaken, because to me, all that will happen is this Great Resignation group here, right? All these people that are sort of jumping to other places, that will shrink, and the quiet quitters will increase. And I think even worse so, because what will happen is you'll have people that resent the fact that they didn't take the opportunity when they had the chance to go somewhere else, and now they feel like they're stuck. And I think that's even worse than those people that leave. Now, the next one that I've heard most recently is this idea of quick quitters. These people that show up at companies and then they leave very fast, right? They don't hang around long. And I think a lot of the data that we're seeing in terms of some of the surveys that are out there would suggest that many of the people that have left to go to other companies, once they get there, they realize that, boy, this wasn't any better than what I left. And they start to regret the fact that they're there. And I think there are two things going on here. First off, from the employee standpoint, I think if you're one of those individuals that you're contemplating, you're a quick quitter, what I would strongly encourage you to do is look to, rather than running away from a situation, figure out a plan so that you run toward your next opportunity. It's not reactionary, right? I'm not running away from this job. It's proactive. I'm actually going to find a way to run toward my next opportunity. I think there's a big difference there. Now, that's a whole separate topic in terms of the employee portion of this, because I think a lot of people personally have quietly quit on themselves, regardless of the organization they're with. I think they've quietly quit on themselves. And again, I'll do an episode outside of that, because I think that's such an important point, whether you've quietly quit at home in your personal relationships or you've quietly quit at work in a professional setting. I think they're equally damaging. And I think on a lot of these things, until you get that piece under control, you're going to continue to quietly quit or be in the Great Resignation or be a quick quitter, because you're not dealing with the stuff that needs to really be dealt with, and that's internally. The book that I wrote, The Leadership Bridge, the first part of this book is all around building a bridge with yourself first. If we don't have that, all these other things will eventually eat away at us. But when we're solid in terms of our own bridge with ourselves and self-awareness and understanding how to navigate challenges and all of those other things, we have control over it. Back to this idea of developing the retention moat. And I'm going to look at this from the standpoint of the organization, the organizational castle, we'll call it. That this is not about building a moat so we keep the talented people trapped within our company. This is about a moat that is built not around alligators and things that prevent people from leaving. To me, it's about behaviors and satisfying social needs that we have. So the first thing I want to talk about in terms of as we build this moat is, what are our social needs? There's a model that I will use often by a researcher, a neuroscientist, Dr. David Rock, and he's out of Australia. This is a model that I first came across back in, I believe it was probably 2009. It's called the SCARF model. And what David Rock did was he identified 5 social needs that we all have. And it's an acronym. And certainly, if you know me by now, you know I love acronyms. So this one, SCARF, talks with first around status, that we need to feel a sense of status, and not the sense of a title importance, but just a feeling of we're appreciated for what we're doing. We're respected. There's worth in us. And I think when organizations understand that, when they're building that moat in terms of how do you retain talent, that when you create an environment where people feel as though or experience a sense of status, they feel valued, appreciated, respected, then you start to create that environment where people don't want to leave, right? They want to stay. The next one is in the SCARF model is around certainty. And this is people want to understand, where are we going? What are the rules of the road? And when there are transition or changes within organizations, when people don't feel a sense of certainty, then we run into problems, right? Any type of change, we don't like that generally. We like good change, but we don't like uncertainty. And that's an important social need that we have. So as organizations, it's very important for us to create environments where people understand what's expected of them. And I'll get into the behavior part of this, but I think let's just leave it at that for now, is that we need certainty. The next one is around autonomy, that people need to feel as though they have a sense of autonomy, that they have control over their destiny in some regards. And this is not to say that when you show up in an organization, everybody just gets to do whatever they want. But when we have environments, and especially now where we're in more of a remote setting, people need to feel as though they're able to sort of design what this is going to look like. And I think when we have managers or leaders, I'll give you one example of where people might be feeling micromanaged, right? Somebody's watching over my shoulder and constantly looking at what I'm doing, or they don't give me a lot of opportunity to have some say in maybe a better approach to how this can be done. When we don't have autonomy, we're losing part of that engagement with an individual when they don't feel as though they have any autonomy over what they're doing. The next one that we talk about is relatedness, right? And this is a sense of connection. Again, I think in this environment we're in, right, the challenge for many of the organizations that I'm working with that have a hybrid model is, how do you create relatedness when you have people that are spread out further now? And there are ways to do it. You need to find that, I think, over the next 2 years. And there's nothing about 2 years. I just think that number for me is that we'll feel this thing out. And I think the organizations that are most flexible and curious in terms of understanding what the right model is in terms of building culture in a hybrid environment, those are the ones that will attract the best talent going forward, right? Because of I think that flexibility that they'll offer. The last one that we talk about is fairness, this social need of people feeling as though that the rules are the same for everybody here, that not one group gets preferential treatment and another group doesn't. And again, I think in a hybrid environment, this can be really important, where some people might feel slighted that they have to come into an office where other people seem to have a little bit more flexibility now. We've got to be able to understand those things and recognize that those are social needs. When people don't feel as though there's equality, there's justice in terms of what's going on, you're going to run into problems. You're going to violate one of those social needs. And to me, when we're building this moat, if we're putting SCARF in there, if we have a moat that satisfies status and certainty and autonomy and creates relatedness and fairness, we create an environment here around this organization where people want to stay. They don't want to leave. How do we do that? What are some of the behaviors? Because really that's what we're talking about here, is our moat, again, is made up of behaviors, social needs and behaviors. A model that I use and talk about quite frequently in the book that I wrote, The Leadership Bridge, is around cables, right? We're building bridges with each other, always. That's all that we do. Each relationship we have with somebody else, imagine that is an individual bridge with that person. And if you think about the quality of bridges that are out there, you can probably think, if you don't have a good relationship and you equate it to a bridge, that's probably one of those bridges that needs repair. It's got potholes in it. Maybe there's rust on it, whatever. It needs work. There's an uneasiness at times of crossing that bridge. It's not enjoyable. Whereas there are other bridges that the relationship is so strong. It's like we enjoy the beauty of the scenery that we get when we cross that bridge. The Golden Gate is one that I will often use as an example. Now, we can have other bridges that have completely been destroyed. We can't cross them anymore, at least not emotionally and mentally. That bridge has been cut off from us. We don't cross that anymore. And maybe it's a relationship we have with somebody that they did something to us, or we did something to them that they finally said, enough. Well, I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore. So important for us to think about in regards to as we build this bridge. So around congruence, walking the talk, is what we say and what we do in alignment? And if it's not, as an organization, if what we hold as values, we don't model in our organization at all levels, then we start to erode those social needs that we all have around maybe fairness or even certainty when we don't have congruence. So the next is around appreciation, recognizing people for who they are and what they do. So important as we continue to shape this moat. It's another behavior that is so important for us to want to retain and have people that are within this organizational castle. They want to stay because they feel like they're appreciated, they're recognized not only for what they do, but for who they are as individuals. And to me, that gets into diversity, really celebrating diversity within an organization. So from there, we move on to belongingness, right? And that ties back into, for a social need, relatedness within that social needs model that David Rock talks about. When we create an environment where people feel as though they belong, they want to stay. This is not about money anymore for the most part. In those people that are in organizations or a part of teams that they really feel a sense of belonging or connection, unless there are financial needs that they need to have met that can't be met in that organization, they're not leaving. They're staying because that bond is so strong. The next behavior that we want to develop is around listening. And we talk about listening in 4 different ways: around listening with our eyes, listening with our ears, listening with our mind, and also listening with our heart, or listening from empathy. And I've got several different podcasts that I speak about these specifically, and I go into great detail in the book. I'm excited. I've actually got an interview that's going to be coming up with a gentleman named Oscar Trimboli, who's out of Australia as well. And he's a world expert in regards to developing strong listening skills. I'm looking forward to being able to publish that episode because I think it's got so much value to it. The next, we talk about empathy as a behavior that we need to develop in terms of this moat, that when we are putting ourselves in the place of those people around us, imagining what it would be like to be them and how they're treated, it changes the relationship, the strength of the bridge that we have with somebody else. And the last one we talk about in terms of behaviors is around specifics, or setting clear expectations as well as ownership to those clear expectations. And if we can go back to the SCARF model, this really addresses things like certainty and fairness as well. We want to know what the rules of the road are. What do we need from each other for this relationship to work well, or for me to succeed in this role? What things need to happen for that to take place? And when we really develop these cables and we put them in this moat that we're talking about, we create an environment where people don't want to leave. Now, just so you know, I think there's also the ability, when we have a bridge here as part of this castle that goes across the moat, it allows two things. I think it allows people that maybe they're not a fit for this organization. They've come to the decision on their own based on the environment, the culture. It's not a culture that they want to be a part of. They have the ability to leave. They cross that bridge. There are also individuals that I think if we constantly practice behaviors around cables, especially around like clear expectations and congruence, that we have other individuals that we've come to the decision that they are not a good fit culturally for this organization. And those people are asked to leave. And I think that's positive too, that there is a certain turnover within an organization that is healthy for us to sort of continue to revitalize this organization. And some people just don't want to be part of that. And I believe we do them a favor when we find ways for them to leave the organization, because let's face it, they're not happy being there. And it allows them to potentially go out and find an organization where they will feel more connected and able to contribute more in a positive way. Unfortunately, some of those people, that's just their nature. They will go to the next organization and they will be the victim there as well and complain about things. But that's not what we're talking about. Those behaviors, right? Building the moat and then providing the bridge for people to want to get off. What that also allows us to do is to selectively look at who comes onto the organization, who enters our organizational castle. And I think we need to be more selective in that. And this is not about discrimination or anything like that. It's about finding those people that are the right fit for the organization. When we do that better up front, the organization continues to get stronger. I think in times when we're lacking staff, right, there's a desperation. We're just going to take people, and really those people aren't a good fit for our organization. And we see that, right, in terms of this quiet quitting, again, or the quick quitting, I should say, which again is interesting to me. New label, old problem. And job hoppers are quick quitters, right? An old term of that. You look, there's a lot of data from especially recruiting companies, and one that I use quite often, it says that in terms of people leaving an organization, they're 10 times more likely to leave an organization in year one than at any other point. And the next highest point where somebody will leave an organization is on an anniversary date. And to me, those things make sense. That I'm going to leave in the first year because maybe what I was told, what I was expecting to have happen when I joined this organization has not materialized. Either I haven't done my part, or the organization, what they said was going to happen hasn't happened, whether it's around opportunities or the type of culture that we have or whatever those things might be, that's not going to happen. The other part is on anniversary dates where people are thinking, you know what, I've been here for 4 years, I haven't moved, or what am I doing? I don't feel happy here. And that's another opportunity where people start to look for other places to go. I think as organizations, in terms of building this moat, I think the best thing that we can do is create leadership as part of our onboarding, right? Train in leadership as part of how we onboard people, those behaviors, those core behaviors. Because I believe when we do that, why wait 2 years to get somebody promoted to then say, okay, now we're going to talk about leadership behaviors. Let's do that right in the beginning. Onboard people. It's not an expensive thing to do. And I think what it starts to do is create an environment where people understand what are the behaviors that we're going to model here. What are the expectations that we have in terms of how we treat each other and how we operate as an organization? And when we provide people with understanding, identifying, and developing what those behaviors and skills are, we create, I think, a much stronger organization from the get-go, because it allows It allows individuals, when they've been onboarding with certain leadership skills or behaviors, the ability to navigate conflict and have difficult conversations. And I would say also drive their own development, right? They feel a sense of empowerment when we have that. I hope you've found this helpful. I think this idea of building this moat in terms of the environment that we're in, this retention mode, is so important. Again, the social needs that we talked about, as well as the behaviors that create that moat where people want to stay within. And again, I think it protects you from companies that might want to come in and try and take your talent. That's what it protects against. I'd also encourage you, I just had a newsletter, a monthly newsletter that is published. Episode 1 has gone out, and it's called the Real World MBA. And this is going to talk about mind, body, and attitude. And again, I think those are the things that when we develop those, we become stronger as individuals. And when that happens, our ability to lead and influence others, it just becomes much more fluid, and we reduce that amount of friction. I hope you found this episode on building a retention moat around your organization helpful as it relates to quiet quitting or quick quitting or the Great Resignation, or about how do you attract, develop, and retain your best employees. Until our next episode, I hope you're able to go out there and rise above your best. Peace.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time, keep rising above your best as a leader.